Nobody wakes up one morning and decides to drift away from God. That is what makes the greatest deception so dangerous. It doesn't arrive wearing a frightening face. It doesn't announce itself with obvious evil. It doesn't always begin with rebellion. Sometimes it arrives disguised as success, as opportunity, as comfort, as entertainment, as endless scrolling, as the pursuit of a better life. And that is what should concern us, because many Christians are watching the world for signs of deception while overlooking the distractions already shaping their hearts. Jesus warned repeatedly about deception in the last days, not merely persecution, not merely wars, deception. And perhaps the most unsettling possibility is that the greatest end times deception may not be something people fear. It may be something they enjoy. Look around. Humanity has never had more access to pleasure, influence, wealth, and self-expression. Yet anxiety is increasing. Depression is increasing. Loneliness is increasing. Spiritual hunger is increasing. How can a world surrounded by so much abundance feel so empty? The answer may reveal more about the times we are living in than most realize. Ecclesiastes describes a man who possessed wealth, achievement, influence, and every earthly desire he could pursue. Yet Solomon reached a haunting conclusion: meaningless. Meaningless. Everything is meaningless. Not because success itself was evil, but because success could never satisfy what only God was designed to fill. And perhaps that ancient warning is becoming more relevant than ever, because modern culture has perfected the art of keeping people occupied while their souls quietly starve. The danger is not always what pulls people away from God. Sometimes it is what distracts them from seeking Him in the first place. The deception begins there, not with rejection, with distraction. And distraction may be one of the most powerful weapons of the last days. The enemy rarely needs to destroy a believer who is already spiritually distracted. He only needs to keep them busy chasing more, busy consuming more, busy comparing more, busy wanting more, until the pursuit itself becomes the destination. Paul described a future generation in 2 Timothy 3 with striking precision: lovers of themselves, lovers of money. Notice what appears first: not violence, not persecution, affection. Misplaced affection. The issue was not merely behavior, it was what people loved most, because what captures the heart ultimately shapes the life. And modern culture excels at capturing hearts. Every platform competes for attention. Every advertisement competes for desire. Every trend competes for loyalty. Every influencer competes for admiration. The result is subtle but profound. People begin measuring worth through visibility, identity through popularity, value through possessions, fulfillment through experiences. Yet Proverbs repeatedly warns that there is a way that seems right to a person, but ultimately leads somewhere very different. That warning feels remarkably modern, because many paths today look attractive. They promise freedom, they promise fulfillment, they promise self-discovery. Yet many people who reach those destinations remain restless, still searching, still unsatisfied, still asking questions no amount of success can answer. Why? Because the human soul was never designed to worship itself. It was created to worship God. And when worship is redirected towards self, achievement, status, or pleasure, the hunger remains. The form changes, The emptiness does not. This is why deception can feel so convincing, because it often delivers temporary satisfaction, just enough to keep people moving, not enough to bring peace. And the cycle continues again and again, until entire societies begin confusing distraction with purpose. Jesus gave an interesting comparison when speaking about the last days. He pointed back to the days of Noah. People were eating, drinking, marrying, living ordinary lives. Nothing sounded especially evil. That is what makes the comparison so fascinating. The danger was not simply wickedness, it was spiritual blindness. People became so absorbed in everyday pursuits that they failed to recognize what was happening around them. Life continued normally until it didn't. That pattern deserves attention, because many assume end times deception will appear dramatically, yet Scripture often points towards something quieter, a gradual dulling of awareness, a slow drift, a society becoming increasingly focused on temporary realities while losing sight of eternal ones. Consider how much energy is invested today in building personal brands, accumulating followers, gaining recognition, maintaining image, protecting reputation. These pursuits are not necessarily sinful, but they become dangerous when they quietly replace deeper spiritual priorities. When prayer becomes secondary, when Scripture becomes optional, when God becomes an accessory rather than the center. The shift is rarely obvious, which is precisely why it works. The enemy has always understood something about human nature. People are easier to deceive when they are comfortable. A distracted heart often notices danger much later than an alert one. Romans 1 describes a society increasingly determined to define truth according to personal desire rather than divine authority. That passage is often discussed in terms of morality, but beneath the moral issues lies a deeper theme: autonomy. The desire to become the ultimate authority, to decide truth personally, to remove boundaries, to redefine identity, to reshape reality around individual preference. Modern culture celebrates this pursuit, yet Scripture consistently warns about it, because once humanity places itself at the center, everything begins orbiting self. And when self becomes the highest authority, God inevitably becomes secondary. This does not happen overnight. It happens gradually, through thousands of small decisions, small compromises, small distractions, small shifts in focus, until eventually the center changes, and many never realized it happened. Perhaps that is why Hosea recorded one of the most heartbreaking statements in Scripture. "My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge." Not because information was unavailable, because attention was directed elsewhere. Knowledge was neglected, truth was ignored, distractions multiplied. The result was spiritual decline. History repeats this pattern repeatedly, not because people stop hearing truth, because other voices become louder. Today, those voices are everywhere: screens, feeds, advertisements, celebrities, algorithms, each competing for attention, each competing for loyalty, each competing for affection. And behind it all sits a question every believer must eventually answer: what truly has my heart? The final deception may not be a terrifying figure appearing suddenly on the world stage. It may begin much earlier, in the unnoticed habits, the endless distractions, the misplaced priorities, the loves that quietly replace greater loves. Revelation describes a world intoxicated by power, wealth, influence, and luxury. But beneath the prosperity stood a deeper reality: spiritual blindness. That warning remains relevant because prosperity can conceal danger just as effectively as suffering, sometimes more effectively, because people rarely question what feels good. They rarely examine what appears successful. And that's exactly why discernment becomes so important. Not merely discerning obvious evil, but discerning subtle distractions, the things that slowly consume attention while offering little eternal value. Because in the end, the greatest end times deception may not be the one people fear most. It may be the one they willingly embrace, the one that feels harmless, the one that feels rewarding, the one that never asks them to stop believing in God, only to think about Him less and less, until one day they realize they were never pulled away suddenly. They simply drifted and drifted and drifted while the world applauded the journey.